parents and their view of the world, and you know it's different. You know the world that you're growing up in is different from what your parents grew up in. I remember this when I was a teenager, right? Back in the day, just emphasizing our
people
age.
were on horses.
No, come on.
But Harish, just now you're projecting a lot of your own views about the world
on the young people.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I do every day.
You've become an uncle. You are an uncle.
I'm an uncle.
This is you young people today. You should be doing this. That's
Exactly.
you.
This episode of the Yalabat podcast is brought to you in partnership with the People's Association Youth Movement, or PAYM for short. We spoke to Senior Minister of State Dr. Janil Puthucheary, who told us more about the 15-month Future Youth Movement, where the PAYM engage widely and deeply through multimodal engagements on 3 issues that the youth resonate with: that of mental health, racial and religious harmony, and sustainability and the environment. The 127,000 youth voices was crystallized into the Youth Charter, a document created by youth for youth. We covered some important questions, a lot of which we feel anyone who cares about the future of Singapore should hear. You can find links to everything we discussed in the show notes, and we hope you enjoy it. And now, on to the podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Yala, your thrice weekly podcast where we talk about the hottest news with a touch of what, Terence?
Good old humor.
Good old humor, man.
Yeah.
Today is one of those days.
Exciting.
Where there's not just 2 of us, there's a third person in the room. And this third person has been on Yalabat a couple of times already.
Yeah, he's up there in the rankings of number of times he's appeared, right?
Yeah, still got some work to do to catch up. But on the way there.
Hey, I'm here anytime you call, bro.
On the way there. And it is none other than Dr. Janil Puthucheary, who is the chairman of the panel of advisors for the PAYM Council. And today we're going to dissect what your title actually means and the work that you all do, because we know that the Youth Charter just came out. So yeah, but before that, how have you been, man?
I've been good. Looking forward to this. Well, actually, I've been a little bit stressed. I mean, like having been on it before, I know how you guys are. Sometimes the tough questions come. I've been overthinking. I mean, just be very clear about it.
Already angkating us.
Yeah, man. I do listen. I listen to the podcast, right? And then when you say, "Can you now appear on the podcast?" I'm like, "Oh man, I have to put in a good showing, man. I have to put in a good showing."
I appreciate that, man. Appreciate that. Yeah, always
but
good to have you.
It's a skill to come on, multiple times, and every time you come, it feels like we're talking to you for the first time, right?
Well, you're very kind. You're very kind. But I take the repeat invitation as I didn't do so badly the last time. I didn't completely mess it up. I hope.
Yeah, definitely not. Now number 3 already. And I mean, it's an interesting year. It's an interesting time. But the thing that I think you guys have been working on a lot is stuff relating to young people.
That's right. Yeah. So the PA Youth Movement, we've been working on issues to do with young people for a long time. PA Youth Movement's been around since 1971.
Yeah.
But last 15 months, a lot of extra work. What's the current view of young people, and then what do they have as a view for the next bound, their future, as it were, and hence the Future Youth campaign that we've had for the last 15 months.
So, I mean, before we get there, like Terence, if I were to ask you, right, what do you think young people are thinking about the world these days?
I think they're thinking about, what do they use to replace TikTok when it's gone? There's one big thing on the mind.
Yeah.
What else do you think?
I just think if I was in my teenage years now or something, I think it's a lot scarier, the world, for a variety of reasons, because we are getting more access to all the scary shit that goes around, and also it feels like there's a lot of negativity in the online space, and everything you see in the news about countries, what's going on abroad. There are stabbings, there are protests, there's so much tension. So yeah, I think being a young person now is hard.
But I think it's always been hard. I mean, I'm not so old that I've forgotten what it's like to be a teenager. I know you guys are younger than me.
I don't want to say anything.
I'm just, hey, come on. I do remember, but it was always difficult because you're in that phase. You're trying to find out what your life is about. Like, what do I study? What CCAs? You're trying to sort of build relationships. I mean, not just boyfriend, girlfriend, but also the friendship networks. You go to a new class, you go to a new institution. You're always, every few years, things are shaking up a little bit. And then there's the relationship with the older generation, your parents and their view of the world. And it's different. The world that you're growing up in is different from what your parents grew up in. I remember this when I was a teenager, right? back in the day, just emphasizing our
People
age.
were on horses.
No, come on.
Policemen wore shorts.
Well, now they're starting to wear shorts again. What's retro is becoming cool again. But the 80s and 90s, and we had that sense that the world was changing around us.
Yeah.
And so I think the idea that it's a difficult phase of life, teenagers, young adults, I think it's always going to be the case. You've got to discover your sense of purpose and understand the world that you're growing up in. Are there things different about this generation compared to the last? Of course. And so I think that sense of difficulty is the reason why we have to pay a little bit of extra attention to what does it mean to be a young person growing up in today's world, and not just take the received wisdom of what it was all about in the previous generation and say it'll be the same for you. It won't.
Yeah.
And we've got to give them a sense of agency, a sense of ability to make a difference to themselves and to their generation. And that's kind of where we're coming from.
But Harish, just now you're projecting a lot of your own views about the world
on the young people.
right?
Yeah.
That's what I do every day.
You've become an uncle. You are an uncle.
I'm an uncle.
Is it you young people today? You should be doing this. That's
Exactly.
you. That is
Yeah,
the Harish. No,
No, that is me. That is me.
Really?
If I was just listening to a podcast, just the audio, I think you're wearing like a singlet and sitting there with kopi, saying,
With good morning towel,
negativity.
everything.
No, but I did want to ask, like you said that there are differences between generations of, how they're reacting to change and the world is very different today from what it was back then. But how people are responding might also be different. What do you think are the biggest changes you see in today's generation of young people versus what you grew up with?
Well, I mean, the role of technology and social media, you can't put that aside, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that sense of having access to information instantly. You have a sense of what people around the world, not just in your immediate community, are thinking about, arguing about. This whole idea of things going viral, making the news. You're exposed to a lot more information. I don't know. I'm not going to presume what your guys' youths were like, but I remember you'd sit around with friends and you'd argue about something. Somebody would bring up something, and you couldn't Google instantly or Chat GPT instantly and verify. And so, every dude in the room would have a view and an opinion. You'd spend a bit of time arguing about it. But today, the argument is settled very quickly. Actually, you're coming in with a lot more information. So it changes a little bit of the dynamics. I think the social media space also has changed how people form relationships. And there's good and there's bad, because especially if you feel a bit awkward or a little bit excluded, you can find people online that you have a connection with much more easily, much faster. And I think for people in that situation, things are certainly better compared to when I was growing up. That if you felt a little bit marginalized, you felt that the mainstream wasn't for you, you can find a connection much faster and a much tighter connection. So there's good and there's bad, and so things have changed. The other sort of dimension that things have changed is that the speed at which things are changing. For the last few years, every few months, new technological things become possible. Memes go viral. Cultural sort of emphasis changes. What was in goes out very quickly. What was hot goes cool very quickly. So that change, that tempo has accelerated a little bit. And then thirdly, the last year especially on the geopolitical scene, international affairs, what was expected about the world, whether it's climate change, whether it's about some of the conflicts, whether it's about the position of the big powers on certain issues, has changed very, very rapidly.
Yeah.
And I think this can cause a sense of anxiety as well. But on the other side, young people today, I think there's a sense of agency, sense of empowerment, that I can do something about this, right? I mean, that I can mobilize people, because I can put up a form online, I can put up a call on my Instagram or my page, and actually you get dozens, if not hundreds of people responding, and you can mobilize and you can get stuff done around a cause that you care about. So that sense of I can do something about it is the positive side of all the things that I've described. I mean, there are young people setting up podcasts, right? I mean, I've got literally people in schools who are reaching out to me, say, can I interview you for my podcast? And I say, no, I'm only going to turn up on your laptop. No, I don't say that. I don't say that. No way. but they have that sense that they can set up a podcast, become a broadcaster, a publisher, a content creator, and reach out to government leadership and say, come and be interviewed. So there's good and there's bad.
But is that all shaped by your own experience, as someone who works with youth, you're a parent yourself, or is it largely shaped by the surveys that have been done as part of this movement?
I think it's all. It's not just the movement. we are been engaging with young people beforehand.
And when you say we, it's the People's Association.
Well, in all the hats that I wear. So People's Association Youth Movement for sure. I mean, we've been working with the youth networks. We have 95 youth networks across Singapore, and they are plugged into a whole bunch of other youth organizations that are their stakeholders and their partners. But also in my role in my constituency, I mean, I work with the young people that's there. In my role as chairman of onepeople.sg, we've talked about that on the podcast in the past. We have a youth wing as well, and I mean, a lot of our work is with youth volunteers. So a wide variety of ways in which we've been engaging. So some of it's surveys, collecting data. Some of it's what people are reaching out to me and us and saying. So in all, and then of course, yes, I'm also a parent, and so my family gives me strong views about what young people think and do as well. All the time.
Focus groups, mini focus groups.
I got to rename my family as my mini focus group.
Correct. And like this whole thing, I mean, like when I was reading up, also like I'm a bit confused between like the Youth Charter, the PAYM, the Future Youth Movement. I mean, PAYM sounds like pay later kind of thing.
No, please, no. It's the PA Youth Movement. So basically, the PA, it's a volunteer organization, right? I mean, we have many volunteer networks, and they organize themselves into subgroups and organizations around causes or issues, and also geography. So like in the area that I serve in Punggol, for example, you say, okay, I'm going to serve this estate or this town, this cause or sports. And one of the ways in which they organize is around youth. So 95 youth networks. So each of these youth networks, all volunteer based, looking to see what is it that the young people they represent are interested in, and how can they get stuff done. PAYM then is like a central organizing council. It supports the views and the efforts of these groups nationwide. And so there's a council of these volunteers that come from these youth networks. And then they say, well, how can we then help the new youth volunteers or the youth networks that are only just getting going? Well, how can we help them do better? How can we help them understand what are the issues? How can we build capability? And more importantly, and in terms of my role, how can we connect them to resources to get stuff done? So we have a panel of advisors, and that's what I chair. So I don't chair the PAYM. The chairman of the PAYM council is a volunteer.
And he's a youth.
He's a young person. I mean, everybody younger than me is young person. I mean,
not necessarily.
No, because I am young.
Forever young.
I'm young, right? So I mean, so that's my moving definition of young, right? Anybody younger than me. But yes, he's a youth volunteer himself. And then we have this advisory panel, and our role is literally to give advice. Like, where do you get money to do this project? How do you connect to a government agency to mobilize this effort? Or how do you complain, or how do you lobby? So that's the sort of structure. Then this Future Youth that you talked about, basically 15 months ago, we launched this Future Youth campaign. And the idea was, well, we wanted to have young people say what is it that they wanted to work on and make a difference about for Singapore and for themselves, for the next generation. So that's what the Future Youth campaign has been about. Mobilizing people and working towards, well, one is this youth charter document. It's a sort of a commitment. All the various stakeholders and the young people get involved. They say, this is how we're going to take these ideas forward. So we divided it up into two phases. The first phase one was the first few months. We said, well, let's decide on the top 3 issues that you really, really want to focus on and that you can make a difference on. And it was open-ended. We just sort of let people let loose, just like go for it. Whatever you think you care about most that will make a difference to your generation, make a difference to Singapore. And then there's a process of, okay, we've got a long list, but we've got to now negotiate. And this is all done by the youth themselves, It's like, I mean, I'm literally watching from afar and, giving them some advice and guidance, but they are deciding, okay, top 3. And then we come down to race and religion. And I think that, well, especially for Singapore, makes a big difference. Sustainability. But that's a global issue, but again, for Singapore, resource constraint, all the different things in our history, it's going to make a big difference to our future and the young people. And then mental health, but mental health in the broadest sense, about that sense of wellness, that sense of confidence, that trust in people around us, and trust in the ability for me to then have a engaging and fulfilling life. So these are the top 3 issues. That's what the young people decided on. Then the second phase was, okay, it's very high level. You can set those ideas, but what are we all going to commit to? What are we all going to do? So there was a call to action, mobilizing people. We've had 127,000 young people contribute then to this set of ideals, which is captured in the Youth Charter. In these three areas, what is it we commit to as values, as principles? But we've also had a mobilization exercise. So the last year, we've mobilized 375 projects. About 4,000 young people have come together and not just written a document, and that's the 127,000 voices, right? Translating it now into action, actual projects to work on these three areas. So that's how, I don't know if it's like a real whistle-stop pencil sketch, right? You got the PA Youth Movement from 1971, all the way to this Youth Charter and all the different components in between. You see, our youth networks, whatever it is they do, and we've got people working in many, many different types of areas, right? Some of it's outreach to low-income households, some of it's doing beach cleanup, some of it's developing like counseling skills. They don't do this on their own. So there are people who like sign up and say, okay, give me the T-shirt, give me the membership form, I'll be a PA youth volunteer, right? Membership card and all. And then they have their friends who also want to participate, but perhaps do in a bit more of a casual way. I come for this project, I come for this cleanup, but as and when I'll come, but and then you've got other organizations, and PAYM works very closely with many, many other organizations.
Yeah.
And so when you say mobilize, it's, well, we have an idea, but it's bringing these people together to then actually do something about that idea. So those 375 projects I talked about was a call to action.
Yeah.
In other words, you're developing these principles, these ideas that are captured in the youth document, but can we show how they translate into action at the same time? Don't like wait for the document till the ink is dry, signed, seen, and delivered. Okay, then now we say, how do we actually go and make it happen? No, we are trying to make it happen as we are writing the document. And that's what I mean by...
And that document is the Youth Charter.
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I remember when I was young and there was certain things, you volunteer and there, but there was a lot of talk. Because people love to feel good, right? People love to say, I care about this, I care about that. But I mean, hearing you say, like, there was a lot that you mentioned about how, 127,000 youth shared their input. It was translated into this document, out of which 350 projects have spawned that kind of address.
So far. 375 so far.
375 so far. So, but then how, like you mentioned, hooking them up with resources, what, the funding or?
Yeah. Right. I mean, funding is certainly there. And I mean, PA, we have funds and we distribute funds for projects. We distribute funds for programs. But also then our partners will also have funding and resources. And then we also then raise funds. And there are people who donate. And then some of the activities, people will sort of pay for a ticket or something. So there are many, many different ways that funds can be raised. But yes, funds are a big part of the resources. But the other big part is actually people. Because if you say, like, okay, a young person, you want to sign up and volunteer, how do I know that this gang that I'm signing out with is legit? It's like doing stuff that's actually going to make a difference. And that's part of this, giving that framework to say, look, this is not just some fly-by-night kind of, hobby horse or someone who's using this as an excuse just to, meet people or something. There's actually a cause behind it. It's legit. There's a call to action. And here's how we're making sure that we're accountable and got the governance right. So that's what PAYM and many other youth organizations provide for young people.
So you mentioned as well that you give a lot of advice to these young people. What do you think is the most common piece of advice that you've given out to them over this whole process? Like what exactly is the gap you see that you can help them to fill?
Well, it's getting back to this point that Harish made about, it sounds like there's a lot of talk.
Yeah.
Actually, the talk's not a small part of it. It's important, especially if, in a way, if you've been doing this for a while and you've volunteered and you've done a lot of community service, you don't need a lot of talk. You sort of, you got 4 or 5 people in the room who are very experienced. You can get going with a project very quickly. You have a common language, you know what the challenges are, you know how the world works. But if you're a young person coming into the space, you have this sort of passion and idealism, which is really, really good, right? So like in the first phase we talked about, where we're putting down all the ideas, there's a lot of passion, a lot of drive. Everybody's like, no, I care about this. I really care about this. But then you put everything on the table and you say, look, guys, we can't do everything. What are we going to focus on first? What's going to make the most difference to the most people for our generation? You have to have a little bit of a negotiation. That's where the talking comes in, right? It's like, okay, if everybody says, I'm only going to focus on my project, I don't care about you guys, right? It's all about, then you're not able to bring 100 people or 1,000 people together. It's every project is 2 or 3 people focusing on their pet topic, right? But if you can have that negotiation, that discussion, and that's what we saw in the second phase, that sense of inclusiveness. How do we find a way for we articulate the project or the idea and then have most people come together on these issues and ideals. So the advice was, okay, take a little bit of time to understand what the guy on the other side of the table is saying, right? Okay. Because, you may say this is the most important cause to you, but then it turns out that actually not many people care about it. Well, why? Find out why. Don't just like diss them and say, well, you stupid. You don't care.
But what's that process like? Because you mentioned input from 127,000 people. You can't be getting all of them into a big auditorium.
No.
Or something. Yeah, so how is that distilled to even having a negotiation between...
Well, it's done by the youth themselves. And so the PAYM Council, the youth volunteers that organize it, they spend quite a lot of time thinking about how to structure this across the 15 months, right? I mean, you do have to have some engagements where literally you get 500 people in a room, right? And you have a presentation and then people ask questions. But then you've got to have some where you go out and you like say, okay, here's a group that's, well, we've never heard their voice before, where they've not had a chance to come to these, these big gatherings. So let's go make an appointment, have coffee, get to know the leadership, and then say, look, let's maybe we co-organize an event. You bring your networks and the people who sign up for your organization, and we'll bring some of our PAYM Central Council or some youth networks that never had a chance to meet with you guys. And so we've deliberately looked for example, people who've been through reformative and rehabilitative training, ex-offenders, for example, right? People from low-income households or people from disadvantaged households. We've deliberately gone out to make sure that there are engagements, and some of these engagements are really quite small, 10 people, 15 people. We've gone to some very successful organizations who've got thousands of volunteers and say, like, okay, we want you to contribute to this as well. So no, it wasn't 127,000 people in the room. It wasn't just like, okay, I put up a Facebook post and who's interested? Sign up, click on the link. I mean, we did also have a link, but it wasn't just any of those things. It was quite a process of thinking through how do we create different ways for people to engage, so that the people who are engaging are coming with different life experiences, different backgrounds, different communities, different views. And then, okay, some of it is just tell us whatever you like, just tell us whatever you care about, whatever you're passionate about. And then some of the sessions were, okay, so this is the aggregate collation of everything we've done so far. How do we prioritize? Okay, this is what other people are prioritizing, this is what you're prioritizing. Well, okay, so then that's why it took 15 months. To slowly work through, go back, work through. Okay, this is now our proposal. You agree? What are the edits you'd like to make? And so the youth voices structured the process, contributed to the ideas, and then worked on the document to then crystallize it and sharpen it and sharpen it and sharpen it, and then at the same time translate it into action. All done by young people.
And the young people would be from what age to what age?
Disproportionately, if you look at the kind of engagements and the kind of people who step forward, actually it tends to be the older teenagers and the young adults in their 20s. So that it's skewed to the younger end of the younger age range. So the younger end of the youth age range.
So the engagement was a lot. I guess it was a mix of like offline and online engagement as well. So I mean, Why couldn't you just do it all entirely online? I mean, there are people online who are really vocal about what they believe in, and you can engage a very big group of people online. But what's the importance of taking offline as well?
Well, I think we've got fairly good data to suggest that quite a lot of people who are online don't actually comment. Right? Okay. I mean, there's quite a lot of people who are silently stalking your Reddit page or your social media page or whatever, right? I mean, they're there, they read, they consume. They are maybe fans, but they are not necessarily the ones who are commenting, who are sharing, who are proactive. And certainly, then there's another sort of step up for the people who are actually posting, right? Who see themselves as creating content and putting stuff out there. So that there's a lot of people who are silent online, but their views matter, and we don't want to leave them out. So you've got to have other ways of engaging them, and that means you have to go offline into the real world. But I think there's also a value at that in-person connection. there's a certain anonymity behind the keyboard, right? And I just fire off and I don't care, right? But you sit there and you're in a room and you have a pet cause, and then the person looks you in the eye and it's like, to your faces, dude, I really don't care about that. It's a different vibe, you're like, what? And I mean, if you're, okay, again, you've been through life a little bit, you know that life works like this. But if you're in a little sort of, if you're, this is the first time you're coming out into the community and first time you're engaging with a wide public, and it turns out that, I don't know, not everybody cares about your most passionate cause. I met this young lady at this event on Friday night where we were having this dialogue with Edwin on the PAYM Future Youth, and her cause, her most passionate cause was Singapore literature. I mean, and I care about Singapore literature, right? So she found a receptive audience with me because I like to read, and authors and everything, and so she's explaining what the group of her and her friends were doing, and she said, "No, I got one question. I really need to make other young people care about Singlit. I mean, it's like not everyone cares. They want to follow other things." And it's that you can see that she had this like frustration because she really cared about it. This was about her and her home and the cultural nuance of what it means to be Singaporean. She says, why don't other people get it? I was like, well, you can't just say this is important to me and then everybody's going to get it and they're going to be as passionate as you are. You've got to take them on a little bit of a journey, and it takes a bit of time, and sometimes other people care about other things. And they might turn around and say, why do you care so much about Singlet and not care about my passion? So there's got to be space for both, right? Yeah. So I think that's the bit of advice that I've it's a process. It takes a bit of time. You've got to be a bit open to what other people care about. You may have to then go on a journey to care about what they are passionate about, and then in doing that, you might understand about how to mobilize people to your cause and to your passion.
But you have shared a lot of examples where there is a lot of momentum, a lot of passion and all. But what about the other extreme? You mean like you haven't encountered any cynicism? And this might be me projecting again. Yeah. But there has to be some cynical youth that you have encountered. So how is that normally dealt with?
Well, I think for the volunteers in our youth networks, certainly, and myself, we being cynical is part of being a young person, just like being passionate is also part of being a young person, right?
I thought cynical is only for older people.
Oh, okay. Different reasons to be cynical, right?
I see.
I mean, so it's not wrong, You don't want them all to like instantly at the minute you put a thing in front of them, say, oh yeah, sure, the world's most interesting thing. Look a little bit askance at you, and you have to convince them. So I think part of it is giving them a chance to engage with the issue. So sometimes for the youth networks or the youth organizations that are passionate about a cause, you have to find a way to make it easy for people to just turn up, get engaged with the issue. So, for example, if you are passionate about sustainability, for example, right? Then you say, well, the only everyone should turn up and help me write a policy paper on carbon tax. People will be like, really? But if you say, well, all you have to do is just turn up and, well, let's do a beach cleanup, or let's maybe catalog the birds in that area for a biodiversity survey. Something really easy. They turn up, they can participate. They don't have to be fully convinced about the importance of your cause, but it's an opportunity for them to get involved. Then the second component is that it helps if there's a social aspect to it, that you can put a face to it. These are people and real friends, and you have connections and relationships. Then I think you have a route to then engage with some of the cynicism and engage and so forth. I think if you think you're going to change a cynic's view by a really clever comment online, no lah, because he can just fire back a clever comment, and then that's the end of it, right? Yeah. So I think that's another reason why you really wanted to have the in-person aspect to this Future Youth campaign, because it's not going to be automatic that everybody will mobilize and be fully on board, and you've got to have a sense of convincing. But better that the people who are doing the convincing are the young people themselves who are passionate about the cause, rather than the old uncle with no hair and cynical attitudes.
Is there like, I mean, you mentioned social, but is there like almost like a social friendship kind of element to
KPI?
No,
how many friends? How many dates?
As in young people these days, right? We talk a lot about young people. They don't do what we used to do back in the day, like with the crazy nightlife and getting out there and partying, all that. but I get a sense that they enjoy camaraderie and like events, meeting other people in events and talking about the things that they're very passionate about. Do you see some of them like actually like forming friendships through this scheme?
For sure. And I think it works in both directions. I think it's sort of to persuade them to turn up for an organization or an organized activity or get involved in a cause. They are far more likely to do so if they can turn up with some friends, right? So I got 2 or 3 kakis I take along, and we all in this. And then, if it's really boring, at least I got you to talk to, right? But that's that sense of comfort stepping into an unknown space. And then, yes, once they're there, they are very likely to carry on if they have a sense of friendship. And indeed, well, I mean, I've mentored and looked after several youth organizations, youth efforts, and you do see them forming very lasting friendships. And whether it turns out into dates and everything else thereafter, more power to you, man. I mean, but that's the nature of it, right? You bring young people together. They meet, they make friendships. There is a natural tendency for the socialization. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Do you all track that?
Do we track? No, we do not.
No.
Just, please let us know when you're like going out for a drink. No, we do not.
Because in Japan, I think they do like beach cleanups and all that as like dating activities, like blind date kind of.
And I won't deny, I volunteered for some things in the past to find a date. And I'm pretty sure, like, you tell me you haven't confirmed, right? Of course. That was a big reason. Hey, I volunteer for this thing that I obviously don't care about, but I'm there.
I've done a lot of good for the world in pursuit of like making friends and meeting people.
Yeah, no, I mean, is it so bad? And it works in the other way as well. I know people. I know some young men who, then you're like, where do you go for your date? Yeah. And then you take your date to a beach cleanup, all right? Or you take your date to something. You know that this is what she's like passionate about. And I mean, trying to impress her.
Youth charter discussion.
Show you care about the world.
There you go. So it works in both. Hey, we are very happy for them to come together at our events for any reason.
And you mentioned that sometimes the people come in and they have certain causes that they're very passionate about. They might run a little bit of friction with other groups that have that kind of passion as well. Like, have you ever, what's the most pushback you've ever received about, that view that you should be listening to other people at the table and all? Has there been incidents where people just get very emotional about it as well?
Well, I think in general, the way in which young people engage with each other is relatively inclusive. I mean, I think there is a sense, and this is certainly a marker of good things that have changed across the generations.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think well, in my time, in my teens and 20s, if I can imagine that if you had some of these discussions, someone would stand up and start cursing and swearing or try to belittle the other person. I think the young people of today, they've seen that there's almost like a pushback to cancel culture. That you don't cancel people. Please, don't be rude. They've seen some of this stuff online. So I think when they get together, my sense is that they're more respectful, and they start off from a sense of wanting to be a bit more respectful, inclusive, which is a great thing. I mean, this is exactly right. So then, even if a difficult someone maybe goes a little bit beyond the boundary, for example, and sort of. There's not a sense of immediate confrontation, It's like, okay, let's take it offline, bro, and like they quietly speak to the guy and whatever. So it hasn't, these sessions haven't degenerated into a mudslinging match or something. This is not, some
no fist fight breaking out.
No,
127,000 people.
No, it's been largely quite, but to be also, I mean, frank about it. It's a little bit of selection, right? I mean, the people who will turn up to some of these events, they're more likely to be the ones who will engage with this respectfully, right?
Yeah.
You're not turning up to this to start a fist fight, frankly, right? So I don't think I would say that this therefore means that you never have contentious issues out there and people don't disagree. But the process has been relatively respectful and inclusive, which is, I think, a good thing.
So then, is it a cause for concern at all that... so I mean, like, again, just not as a very young person myself, a lot of the perspectives that I form is like, looking at stuff online, talking to people. But it almost seems like, yes, there's a lot of young people who are passionate, but it's more polarized than ever. So as much as there are people who are passionate, I would imagine there are people who are at the other extreme. And you hear all these movements, the lay flat, lay flat movement, the quiet quitting, Not to say that's only confined to young people, but is it a cause for concern at all that, yes, you're getting a lot of these, as you say, self-selected people, but at the other extreme, there is more mental health issues, there's more cases of anxiety. It feels like that extreme, is that kind of like, how is that being addressed?
Well, I think one of the advantages that I have, privileges, I suppose, is the work in the community that I represent in the constituency and the grassroots advisor, member of parliament. You don't have to be protected by that selection bias. I have to serve all the young people in my constituency and I have to engage with all of them. And so from my perspective, and I think it is supported by some of the data that's out there and other people's perspective, I think that these phenomena, quiet quitting, lying flat, they are not part of our society here in Singapore. It's stuff that you read about online, and certainly they may be prevalent in other cities. You not being there, you don't know how much of it is the people who want to create content that is clickbait, frankly speaking. Is it 1%, 10%?
Yeah.
But I think it's not very prevalent here in Singapore. Are there people who are not passionate about these causes that we've talked about? Sure. But I think I would also be a little bit cautious, because depends what you mean by passionate. They have their own things that they care about and worry about, right? Yeah. And well, at certain stages of your life, it's not wrong to care about, your sports or whether it's your own sports team or the sport that you are playing, and you say, look, I'm an athlete or I'm a musician. I don't have time to come and help with your biodiversity survey or your mental health counseling. I want to focus on my music, or I want to focus on, or in fact, you say, look, I want to be a scientist and I do research and that's what I focus on. There are different types of passions. There are different types of commitment. And we say, look, let's not over-focus on the academics. Let's not over-focus on building out your portfolio. But not everybody can chair their own VWO, and not everybody wants to sort of champion a social cause. I mean, some people want to start a business and some people want to prepare to start a business. And it's okay. So I think the space is very, very diverse.
Yeah.
I think it's you need to recognize that we have to create the opportunities for all of these pursuits of passion, as it were, or pursuits of excellence. Different ways of defining passion, different ways of defining excellence. And if what you are passionate about is looking after your family because you have to, or because you need to, or because you care about it, you need the time and space to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And not say, well, please look after your family less and then come help me with my beach cleanup. Well, I can't now, but maybe later when everything in my family is sorted and I got more time, different phase of my life, I'll come and help you with your cause. So I think we got to be a little bit forgiving on this.
Yeah.
The youth space, I think my sense is our young people in Singapore, they are not disengaged. Actually, it's the opposite. They are very engaged and they want to know, how can I get involved and do something?
I guess what I was getting at was the darker side of that. Because, yes, people can be passionate about many things, but we're also seeing more cases of younger people getting radicalized, for example.
Yeah.
In some way, they are passionate about that.
Yeah.
But it has very destructive consequences.
Yeah.
So is that something that worries you or the volunteer network? That, okay, we are getting a lot of good, positive traction here, but there are these issues that, I mean, of course, Reddit and all is very self-selecting to the other extreme, but there's a lot of bleakness there. So how are you thinking about that trend?
Well, it's in a way, it reinforces the need for making sure that socialization, social networks, and social cohesion always a work in progress. And actually, it's very easy to take a view, oh, this one all settled already. But you very quickly will lose the benefits of the social cohesion, the socialization, and the social networks. And the better that we can proactively build up that sense of society, that it's not just me, right? I've got to think about we and us and my family and my community and my country, that the natural picture shouldn't just be self-centered. But it's very easy to be self-centered. So the work of groups like PAYM and many other community organizations, it matters when something goes wrong even more, right? But the way to be able to respond when something goes wrong is, before anything goes wrong, build up those opportunities, build up that social cohesion. So the sense of, well, I can meet other young people whom I don't naturally connect with. I can find common cause, even if they have different skin color, different race, different religion, different background. and we can build a common future together. Those are wonderful ideals, easy to write down in a short paragraph, but very hard to make happen. And it requires a lot of work. So when we have our sessions, we deliberately make it a point. But we want people from schools of every description to come. We certainly want to make sure every race and religion is represented in the room. Every community, every background is there. But it's not just turning up. In a way, it's hard to do, but it's even harder to go to the next step, which is not enough just to have the number and the representative. You say, oh, tick, I got one from this school, I got tick one from this race, I got tick. Actually, you got to take the next step. It's like, we got to do something together. In other words, you got to have a project, you got to have a cause, you have a task, you come together, work together, regardless of race, language, and religion, regardless of your lived experience. You've got to work together as one society. All very idealistic, I know. Sounds like National Day Parade is right. But these are the things. So when we see that, you say, okay, look, another youth self-radicalize, or another youth exposed to terrible content online. Actually, it means it's a call to action. We have to double down on our efforts. Those pressures, those forces that are trying to affect us, they are there and they are always going to be there because we are open to the world and our young people are open to the world. You can't shut us off from the internet. You can't shut us off from ideas from around the world. So it's much more about how do you build the immunity and the resilience and keep doing so for each generation.
Okay. So, I mean, just now you mentioned like there are certain causes that might not see eye to eye with other causes. And there are some certain things, like you talk about sports. I think in the last couple of decades, Singapore, we found our heroes, right? Joseph Schooling, Shanti Pereira,
Max
and
Mader.
Max Mader, and young people it's easy for them to see these examples and get inspired. But how about in other areas, like when you talk about sustainability or even race and religion? I mean, the world is getting much more polarized. It's not as easy to find heroes, in that sense, like how easy it is not easy, but in sports it's much more obvious, right? Like you win a gold medal, that's it, right? That's a pinnacle. So how do young people go about finding these heroes in their respective fields? Like what do you advise them to do to really go out there and find the heroes that such that they don't end up like what Harish was saying, getting self-radicalized or looking at content that's really harmful and horrible for everyone else?
I think we have many inspiring people with us, and I think when it comes to the issues that you brought up, race and religion, sustainability, social cohesion, in a way, the analogy in your description, I think, is very, very apt. You talked about how in the recent years we have found our local heroes, right? I mean, there's a shift, isn't it, that we have appreciated that actually we can and we should support the efforts of what we're doing here in Singapore, and that we have people pursuing that sporting excellence, demonstrating the athleticism, but also the commitment and the sort of role modeling, frankly speaking. That's why you call them a hero, right? I mean, and for race and religion and sustainability, you look around the world and you can get despondent if you focus on how things are going wrong. But you should, I think, pay a little of attention to how things are going right here in Singapore. And we do have people who are working very hard on these issues. But should they? I think many of them wouldn't call themselves heroes. And I think where the analogy breaks down is that there isn't a gold medal. There isn't I've reached the end of the finish line. I've got my medal. I waved the flag, Majulah Singapura, and then that's the end of it. I think the people who are working on race and religion and sustainability, they are heroes because they don't finish the race. They just keep on going and working at it. So that doesn't give you the nice little photo op on the podium, and then a story chapter and a close, right? But I think they are inspiring because they understand that this is a work in progress. That other countries, the climate change, for example, the situation may change and flux, and are we going to bust 1.5? Are people in the Paris Agreement? Are they not? Are people meeting their commitments? Are they not? But that doesn't mean that we have to stop trying, right? And then there are people working on it day in, day out, trying to keep going. Same for race and religion, right? You build those bonds, you have your open house, you have your friendship circles, you do the education, and then yet another incident in some other part of the world where basically their concept is my tribe or your tribe, and let's find a way to squeeze the other guy out, right? Not our approach here in Singapore. But I've said this several times to groups of young people. We shouldn't beat ourselves up so badly, in both sustainability, biodiversity, as well as social cohesion, race and religion. We're not doing so badly. The rest of the world looks at us and they say, this is a city that's getting a little bit greener every year, whereas most cities are going in the other direction. And we have to have the entirety of the city within our borders, right? It's not like our national park is in some other part of the country. Everything is within our borders. We're a city where biodiversity actually is increasing. You just see the, pictures of otters, but also birds, but many other things that people are spotting. And it's remarkable. It's not everything. It's not as if we've settled then, all the climate change issues for the world, but it shows that there are things that we can do. You look at the increasing deployment of solar power, increasing change out to EVs. There are many things, increasing efficiency, even something as prosaic as water efficiency. From a certain generation, how important that was, right? But we continue to improve. So, okay, yes, you could spend all your time looking at how things are going wrong in the world, but maybe have a sense of reality that in Singapore, there are some things we are doing right, but it doesn't happen accidentally, and it doesn't mean that you can then say, okay, everything is settled. And I would say the same for race and religion. Have we got everything settled? No. Is there still racism in the world? Yes. Is there discrimination? Yes. But how it plays out in our lives is really quite different over the last 10 years. There was a survey that OnePeople.sg and IPS released recently, which shows that actually things have continued to improve over the last 10 years quite significantly. So celebrate those wins. There isn't a gold medal for this kind of thing. It's the absence of things going wrong. And I think there are plenty of inspiring people to look to.
So sorry to be a Debbie Downer again, but was it that survey that also showed that younger people have less close friends now and less friends of a different race?
Yes, Debbie.
Yes.
But the reason is important to look into it. Because actually all of us, our social circles are shrinking. It's a worldwide phenomenon. It happens in many developed cities, dense urban environments. As our online networks are increasing, what you would count as a close friend and a social circle is decreasing. And so, if your total number of close friends in a social circle is decreasing, then by definition, the number of friends of a different race is also going to be smaller. So, the fix or the thing to address, I think, is not to say, as every one of your friends has to be of a different race. Actually, the thing to address is, how do we push back a little bit and increase the number of social circles? So make it easier for people to meet and have these social circles of friends. And I think it's something that people want. I think there is a sense of wanting to push back against loneliness. And I think it starts in the young as well. And so, again, I come back to in-person engagements. Very, very important. So if you're listening to this podcast on your own, after it, can you go please and meet someone?
And basically what you're also saying is that Terence should be grateful I'm his friend.
There you go. It's all about you, bro. All about you.
It's my community service.
We talked a lot about how, on the podcast, we've mentioned a lot about how COVID-19 is quite a defining few years for this generation of young people, where they never got to experience, a graduation or, even dating in person and all. And do you see any big effects of COVID-19 and all those years it took away from this generation?
Or like all the survey respondents from like a certain age.
Because talking about friend circles, my friend circle definitely shrank because of COVID, right? You just don't have as much.
And personality also, Personality
shrank.
Your friend circle shrank.
Oh, because of my personality. Uncle already. Like you, I just sit there complaining about everything. No, but do young people, do they talk about COVID-19 in a way that, it's like this traumatic event that happened in their lives? Or now that we've had a bit of time since it all happened?
Not something that I've experienced myself personally, about young people talking to me about COVID-19. I suspect like many people, I certainly don't particularly want to talk about COVID-19. It's like a fever dream from 5 years ago. So I can't quite believe it happened in quite the same way. It's like, move on. But I think your insight that it changed how socialization happens for a certain generation, I think is true. So I think but they recognize it, and I think people want to go out, they want to meet. You made this comment, they don't party all night like we used to. but like this culture pass that we heard, right?
Yeah.
So then I was quite excited by this idea that it's a way to then get Singaporeans to go out and enjoy. Well, maybe not the kind of nightlife and the clubbing and the drinking I don't know that counts as culture pass, but certainly in-person engagements, right? And do it with a friend. Go out together with a friend, right? So could this lead to another wave of culture-driven dating? Maybe, and I think there's interest from young people to use the culture pass and to go out and meet in person.
So the one thing you mentioned, I mean, like I will also say that as cynical or as much of an uncle I've turned into, I do think that there is a lot more passion and agency amongst young people, but where do you draw the line? Because one thing that we've covered in the past was that case where, you slash tires of SUVs. Because, you're passionate about... No, you're not, you slash, you puncture or you deflate. And in some way, you could argue there is a passionate young person who is taking action and doing things himself. But
trying to organize people to do it together.
And it's a global movement. So it checks all the boxes.
But it's also,
But it's not...
But please don't do that.
So how would you... Because, there's radicalization, which is... that's horrible. I think universally everybody can agree. Then there is the stuff that is on textbook, the textbook way of doing stuff. But there's middle ground. Because even on the podcast that we were talking about, of course it was clear to us both that we agreed that that's not ideal. But the lines were a bit grayer, right?
Well, I think in history... people go and get engaged in some kind of, extreme protest, shall we say, right? Violent action or vandalism or crime. If there is a sense of hopelessness, this is something I need to do something about, and there's no other way for me to do anything about. That doesn't make it right. There's someone who's hurt as a result. There's some damage done either to a person, to a property. So it doesn't make it right, but one of the ways to deal with it is to remove that sense of hopelessness and frustration. In other words, say, well, okay, why are you passionate about this? And then how do we find a way for you to direct those passions positively? Provided that the thing that you're passionate about actually is a force for good, right? If the thing that you're passionate about is a force for good, well, frankly, PAYM and many other youth organizations will find a way to direct and say, look, okay, you want to raise awareness of climate change or fossil fuels. How can we do so? How can we help do that make it a positive, rather than say, well, there's nothing to be done here, and then some angry young man finds that the only way he can give an outlet to give an expression to his passion is by committing a crime, and that's a terrible outcome. But so you have to then firstly start on the basis of, is the thing that they're passionate a good thing or a bad thing? Does it make the world a better place? Does it help us as a society? The other thing that we also find, rather than just say, okay, let's find a positive way of doing it, for young people, they don't often have a sense of who else is working in this space. So mental health is an area where I'm very familiar with because of the work that I do on the task force for mental health. And young people will say, I want to raise awareness of this condition, or I want to increase the capability of counseling for this group of people, and they are not aware that there's already 3 or 4 VWOs or charities or social service agencies already working who are like calling out for volunteers and wanting more people to come along, right?
And sorry, a VWO is a
voluntary welfare organization. A charity, right?
Okay.
And so then this young person says, I've got to go and start, and it's so difficult, and nobody's watching my podcast, or nobody's turning up to my events, and why doesn't anyone take me seriously? And yes, it's difficult to get going, but maybe part of what we can do is then connect them and say, look, maybe go and volunteer with this established organization. It's been around, it's got tons of people, it's got resources, but they need more volunteers and they want your youthful passion. Go and learn from them, learn the ropes, get engaged in this space. Then 2 or 3 years later, you want to go and start your own charity or your own society. Okay, great, but you've learned the ropes. So then finding this outlet for positive change is not just about the resources, but also the connections. And then a certain type of mentorship. Not the mentorship of the Harish uncle kind of like, you're a young man, you must do this. No, it's more like, well, how can I help you work out what is it that you want to do? Yeah. How can I help you work out who can do this with you and what's the way to negotiate and navigate? So I would say those are the three ways that we want to try and do all this. And recognize that, well, firstly, it's good that the young people have passion. You don't want an apathetic, like lie flat type of young generation. You want them to be passionate. Yeah. But not all passions are useful to all of us as a society. You've got to find a way to direct it. But it's not just about removing the negative, but giving a positive outlet.
So, I mean, I'm sure you advised a lot of the projects under this engagement. What is one of them that has like inspired you? Like you completely, oh wow, I didn't know that young people were capable of doing this.
Actually, just to be fair, I didn't directly advise a lot of the projects.
Okay.
The reason being that our more experienced youth volunteers are the ones who are directly advising. Sure. Okay. So in a way, that's also quite heartening about the journey that our young volunteers are going on. Yeah. That some of those who are in the PAYM council, the in a way senior youths, right? Yeah. The more experienced young, they are the ones who are directly engaging with the youth networks, the volunteers who are coming in for the first time and say, oh, I've been doing this for a few years, I've been through a few projects, and giving some advice. Sure. I'm
sure one of them must have inspired you.
So I mean, there are some. There's one RN one YN youth network that decided they wanted to work on mental health, and they worked together with an organization that was already existing, a care corner, and worked through counseling, worked through skills development. What was heartening was that sense of not just that this was important, but I wanted to then build a partnership in order to then deal with this, but also that where they wanted to focus on was skills development. In other words, that we have to improve ourselves in order to help each other. And so that sort of insightful caring, I think, is because it's very easy to say this is something wrong in the world and it's terrible and I just want to raise awareness or I just want to complain about it. But it's like taking the slightly longer term view, which is I want to do something about it. And in order to do something about it, I need to bring other people with me and I need to improve my capabilities and the capabilities of people around me. It's a considered caring, which I thought was very heartening and very, very useful.
So on that note about like a certain thing that inspired you or something, was there anything from looking through all this feedback, listening to discussions that surprised you, like an insight from the youth that surprised you, maybe scared you, worried you, disappointed you, anything that stands out?
Well, I mean, when we had the first cut of all the like many different things that people are passionate about, right? Yeah. And before you know how it's going to what do you call it? Distill into these things. And you yes, because you kind of like, these three, let me tell you, can I put a star? You'll go for, but you don't want to, right? You want to leave it a little bit open and so yeah, some of those things are shall we say pretty some of those suggestions could have been a bit worrying about like let's I don't know, get rid of the Constitution, or for you got to be open. Wow. People will put all kinds of comments. I don't think there was specifically one about getting rid of the Constitution, but I mean, it was that some of our long-held structures of that for example, protect minority rights, or that ensure our safety or ensure our independence and sovereignty. And you say this as an uncle, and you say this as a bit of experience. So for the young person to fire off a comment here, comment there, okay. But thankfully, actually, the process worked, and then other people said, yeah, maybe we don't do that this time, and these are the things that we... So sure, there were certainly comments. I don't know that I want to repeat an actual comment because maybe that means the person might be, that was me.
Yeah, I understand.
So the examples that I've given are hypothetical.
No, but at least, I mean, it's in some way, if you told me there were no examples, then I'd be like, okay, don't play games with us.
No, for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
No, for sure. So then you get these are all the submissions. And then, it's almost like what's that, you go to some of these things and they have an upvoting and a downvoting of comments, right? And then you're like, will this be upvoted, right? And you sort of see one down there and you think, okay, this is kind of like a little bit beyond the pale. But as I say, I'm giving hypothetical examples because otherwise, I don't want to call out someone.
Understandable. But on that note, right, where you see these things that can be worrying, do you think what's happening around the world at this point in time, especially the US, you're seeing the leadership there act in a way that it's almost unbelievable the kind of things they are doing, and there's a lot of people who support that. Do you think that those sort of things, like you mentioned, geopolitics the past year has been hard? Do you think that is going to infiltrate down into the youth of Singapore, and it's something more that we need to protect them against, or how should we think about that?
Well, no, for sure. I think the young people do listen and do read, do engage in these issues, and the impact of some of the changes on the international stage, the geopolitical situation. Yeah. I mean, it's breathtaking, right? I mean, every few days.
I mean, even DEI stuff, right?
That's right. The position of big countries, the position of institutions, their relationships, it is changing, and I think young people are affected, and I think they are concerned and they are interested. So when we say these are the top three things, it's not the only things that young people are concerned about. There are actually a whole bunch of other things that young people are very legitimately interested in and concerned about. But these three things, race and religion, mental health and sustainability, these are the three things that young people felt they can do something here in Singapore for themselves and for Singapore, right? So things like geopolitics and the international relations, I think, is it something we have to pay attention to? Is it something that as a country we have to think carefully how we position ourselves and how we make sure that we look after our interests? Answer is yes. Is it something that you can mobilize young people to do something about? Well, the short answer is no, but the slightly nuanced answer is not directly. Because it's not the kind of thing that you mobilize a youth network to directly go and address, for example, what's the US-China relation or what's the position on the Russia-Ukraine war and so forth. However, social cohesion in Singapore is a very, very important factor of how we engage on our international front. How we engage externally actually does rest upon reducing how much polarization and fragmentation we have internally. So in a way, it's not something that will come out in the direct conversations with young people about what they want to mobilize and do something about here in Singapore. But in the background, as we're looking, we're supervising and we're giving advice, we know, there is a bigger picture that we are serving here by improving social cohesion. So short answer is yes, I think young people care and they know, but I think they wouldn't put it as a let's mobilize young people to go and fix kind of bucket, which is where those three topics, I think. And it's not the only example. I think young people care very much about future opportunities. Like you're going through your training, you're in poly or you've just exited into the workforce, you're acquiring new skills, you're learning new techniques, and then you see, DeepSeek can do this, or ChatGPT can do that, or this AI company is, And so there is a sense of then, where are my future opportunities and my future jobs going to be? And I think that is very much top of mind for a lot of young people. But in a way, that's not something that you want or you can fix as a youth volunteer network. Actually, although I do know some youth volunteer networks that are trying to do some work in this space. How do you better match, for example, new entrants into the workforce with skills development that will be appropriate for them in a world rapidly changing with AI. But these are issues which, in a way, the agency is not with the youth network so much, but these are things that, the government, the tripartite partners, working with the unions, working with the employers, we have to do something about it and create opportunities for the next generation. They have views, the young people have views, the young people care about these things, but maybe, rightly speaking, the agency and the responsibility is not with the volunteer youth networks, right? So that's the way that I would scope it out. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they care about. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they care about that they think they can directly do something about. That's where this Future Youth campaign and PAYM is working in.
Got it. So I mean, looking at this whole thing, you mentioned just now that you wear many hats, right? And one of the hats is...
That's why I got no hair.
I mean,
think
no comment. No comment.
All right, yeah.
Do I need a career in stand-up comedy? No, just
We can talk about that later.
Okay, that's right.
But you know, one of the hats that you do wear is as a politician, which we're not going to get into. Maybe we might get you back for another podcast to talk about that specifically.
Sure.
But you know, everything you're saying about here, this immense amount of feedback that young people have gotten, and they have worked it out themselves, involves negotiation. So you know, yes, you advise them on stuff, but anything that you have learned from them. Because, I mean, we've been to like Parliament, you know, it's all about exchange of ideas. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes it feels like as you get older, it's harder to negotiate. But when you look at these young people, anything that you have learned from them?
Short answer is yes. It's a lesson that I've learned several times.
Yeah.
But every time we go through these types of exercises, it's a lesson worth reinforcing. And in a way, I'm surprised that I have to relearn the lesson which is the confidence that actually we should have in our young people. They can be quite sensible and they can settle these matters themselves. So you can, I think, increasingly trust that young people can engage with these questions in a sensible way, understand that not everybody feels the same way, that there is a need to then find and seek common ground. So that sense of trust in the ability of our younger generations to then deal with difficult issues and difficult questions only increases every time we go through one of these exercises that I've participated in. And I'm always surprised at how much that heartening sense comes to me every time. It's like, okay, they worked it out. Yeah, okay, this is quite sensible. Okay, let's carry on.
Yeah, I learned that every morning while trying to brush my 4-year-old kid's teeth. It's like, no, I can do it myself. Okay, fine.
Well done. Oh, we're very good. Excellent.
That's why I'm sure your kids might extract that excerpt out, and anytime you have an argument with you in the future, you say, see, you need to believe in me.
I do. I mean, my kids are not 4 years old, so mine are much older. I mean, I think, once they are teenagers, they got to start learning how to find their own way in the world and work out how the world works.
I mean, I still got a long way more before I have to deal with stuff like that.
How old is yours?
6 months, almost 6 months.
Okay, so not yet brushing her own teeth.
Not yet. No teeth. Yeah,
okay.
no teeth.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, not yet.
But the pushback will begin shortly.
Pushback.
Pushback.
I'll cross the bridge when it comes, lah. Yeah, but so at the end of the day, like at this point, right, for the young people, there's this youth charter that is out, right? What would be the call to action for them? Like, where do they go to find out more stuff, or be involved, or get involved?
Well, the youth charter is a set of ideals, a set of principles, but the stakeholders who've signed on to the youth charter, what they're saying is, in their activities in this space, this is how they're going to conduct themselves. In other words, these are the outcomes that they want to engage in, right? So it's a commitment from the young people to the rest of the young people about how these organizations and these young people are going to conduct themselves. So yes, there's a hashtag, there's a link.
There's an Instagram account, PAYM.youths for the PA Youth Movement, the Youth Movement Instagram account.
Yeah. Or they can look at my Instagram. I'll share the link as well.
You have Instagram?
I have Instagram. I have Facebook. I'm like, I have WhatsApp. My constituents WhatsApp me as well. So,
yeah. Because the exercise will be going on. Like you mentioned that phase 1 is completed. Now there's phase 2.
Yeah.
How many phases are there?
The launch of the youth charter is basically it's like a closing of the Future Youth campaign. So the 15-month campaign comes to an end. Yeah. We have this document. We have these commitments and these networks that we've built. Now it's putting all that into action. So the call to action is out there, and it's now, let's get on with it. So there isn't another phase. It's like, let's get on with working on these issues.
Okay. It's like the Millennium Goals that the UN had and stuff like that. There are these things we want to
Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so for young people, it's to actually follow the PAYM on social media and find out how to get involved.
Please do.
Yeah. And Janil on Instagram.
Yeah. PAYM, and then if you're slightly older, if you're not quite such a young person, you may want to follow me. My content may not be so cool. PAYM.youth.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, I mean, as with all podcasts, we have our One Shiok Thing segment. And I mean, you mentioned before that you've done a lot of homework.
Yeah. No, I was really overthinking this. I'm like really overthinking.
I mean, we appreciate that. When
no, do I go first or do you go first?
I mean,
or do I have to explain why I'm overthinking this?
No, we leave that for the last part.
I
go
see.
first.
You have to go first. Okay.
Yeah, and then I mean, like you end off lah. You're the guest. Right?
I think you set the bar so high. That's why I'm overthinking it.
You'd be
man.
surprised. You'd be surprised sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna lowball this one?
Maybe. Yeah. But you can see it. So Terence, you have your one Shiok thing.
Mine's the TV show Succession. I got into it in season 1, then it got a little bit slow for me. But season 3 and 4 picked up, and it's just a very nice. I just realized again, it's a family drama mostly. Wrapped in a shell of like corporate intrigue and backstabbing and all. But at the end of the day, it just boils down to relationships between siblings and kind of an absent dad as well. So, as parents and dads and all, there are lessons to learn about how to bring up children. And especially if it's more than one as well, like what you should do.
Wow, that's a very introspective kind of show to watch that you learn from. Like my one Shiok thing is a show I watch with my wife to escape lah.
Okay.
Because on Saturday night we finally had a night to just chill out and we say okay let's we had some home cooked food and let's watch a movie, but a movie not to learn from, just to have a very light-hearted movie, And we finally watched a movie that I've been meaning to watch for a long time. It's called The Intern. With Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway.
Yeah.
And it's such a light and nice and feel-good show that I would recommend it to anyone who just wants to just watch something, got some very funny moments, got some very sad moments, and by the end of it, you're like, that was a nice watch.
Okay.
Yeah, it leaves you with a nice feeling. Got some... it could totally have been made in Singapore, as like a Skills Future funded movie. Because it is about a 70-year-old man who gets a senior internship at a young startup.
Okay.
Yeah, and the relationship between him and the CEO, not romantic, but just like mentor-mentee kind of thing.
Okay.
So it's a great show. Have you all watched it?
No, I haven't.
Yes. But I guess, generally our one Shiok things have this theme of like old person dealing with younger people. Kind of thing, right? Wow.
Yours is the most serious one.
More serious,
Yeah, mine was like, I just want to feel good about this. And
So it's a date night movie. I'll have to recommend this to my wife. Okay.
yeah, it is a really, really, you watch it. It's not something you go to sleep thinking about and all, and plus Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway are great actors.
Superb.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so it's funny. Yeah, it's I highly recommend it.
All right.
Yeah, and now
Now,
to you,
finally.
Janil.
Man, I'm like so nervous. My palms are sweaty. It's like, see, the problem is I have to explain why I'm overthinking this, because having been on the podcast before, I know that this is a thing that you guys do. And then I like listen to your podcast and I like know this is a thing that you guys do.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, if I'm turning up on the podcast, I have to land this. I have to get I'm so I spent the whole week thinking about this.
Oh, solid. Solid.
Youth policy and the numbers of Future Youth campaign. I'm like, I got that.
You're setting up yourself a very high.
I know. That's why I'm like trying to set the expectations. So I was gonna go, and so then I had this whole thing about your Shiok things are often online, right? And we talk about
true.
And then I had this whole thing about how we have to have people go and meet in person and blah blah blah. So I was going to try and land a point when I had my one Shiok thing. So I was going to use the culture pass, by the way, which I then referenced in the podcast.
Yeah.
Which then we had the Chingay parade in the Heartlands, Pasir Ris Punggol. Long day in the constituency, and it was a long parade. It was quite a physically tiring day. And so right at the end, we were at the square in Punggol West. It was like a huge party, right? Lots of people, blah blah. And we had some entertainers, the artists and entertainers. They sort of work the crowd and they go around. And they had these ladies, and they had these massive kind of outfits with wings and headdresses. And then some of them are like on stilts, and some of them are wearing heels. And so we get off the bus, we're going around, and I met one of them, and I was like, wow, the makeup and this outfit, and it's going to be hot and sweaty and difficult, and how much does it weigh? And then one of my colleagues says, and she's been here for like the last 3 hours.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? And then like her response was her response was my one Shiok thing. She just said, no, it's okay. People are having a great time. That's what I'm here for. And I'm like, oh man. I was just like, you've been working hard whole day and you have this complete, confident, cool way of just like, no, I'm here to make sure everybody has a good time. It's no big deal. And I'm like, because I'm thinking, you're wearing that, you're sweating, you're tired. But she was just totally like, no, chill. I'm here to make sure everyone had a good time. And that attitude, that kind of thing, it just reminded me, when we want to go out and be entertained, we want to go out and engage in these activities, these social in-person gatherings, culture. Well, the entertainers, the people who are doing it, they're doing it for a reason. And well, maybe it's good that they want us to be entertained and have a good time. And it's what we can do is show that we're having a good time and show some appreciation to them. So that made my day. So whoever you are, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're not, why not? But if you are listening to this podcast, thank you for making my day. That is my one Shiok thing.
The name or the troupe or
what were they wearing or performing specifically? Do you
well, she was wearing this. She was wearing this blue thing. It was covered in sequins, and she had these.
And she was on stilts.
Was she? Yeah, was she one of the ones on stilts? Yeah, she was. She was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So actually, you could watch the Chingay and possibly see her during the parade.
Yeah. Although she was at the Punggol West Square, so I don't know if she was based there or she had come along and then come off the buses. I think she had been there beforehand because one of these like street party type gatherings that they.
I mean, we will try and like find the name of like.
There were a whole bunch of them. There were a lot of them, so I didn't.
Social media or something.
Yeah, something on social media. But yeah, if those people, I mean, if she listens to this or someone knows that person. Yeah, shout out from Janil.
Did it bring a tear to your eye when she said that to you?
I'll say yes, bro, but in spirit, in spirit.
No, it's okay. I mean,
as a spirit tear.
You don't tear up easily, Janil. Like when you watch movies, all.
Not really.
No,
I tear up when I see people in the element, like in the flow of doing something they're so good at that, like they're you just watch them, you're like, wow, these guys are really, they've mastered it and they work so good together as a team. The last time I watched like a lion dance as well, I was almost like floored because I was just amazed at how much coordination and effort that they put into just ensure that the kids and everyone's just having a great time.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah, so I super respect like when people like what you said, their response is just as long as everyone's having a good time, we're here.
Performers like that, right? I get that sense that the people who like to perform like it when people enjoy themselves. It must be so. That's why they're in it. Then, showing that we enjoy ourselves and we're having a great time. Actually, it's like a reciprocation, right?
It's validation of the effort also.
Yeah.
But cool. Thanks so much for coming on again.
Thanks again, guys.
Always good to chat with you. So the links that we mentioned are all in the show notes. Remember to follow us on social media. Follow Janil on social media. If you want to work with us, just check out ministryoffunny.com. All right, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you all soon.